Hey there, and welcome. For a long, long time, physics was seen as the absolute gold standard of science, right? It's got these huge universal laws that just work. And biology, well, by comparison, it often seemed kind of messy. It didn't have that same kind of ironclad certainty. So today, we're going to dive into whether that really makes biology a lesser science, and we're going to uncover the incredibly powerful and unique ways it actually explains our world.
So let's start with the biggest question of all. What even makes a science scientific in the first place? For ages, people had a very specific and, frankly, a very demanding answer to that. For centuries, the answer was just one word: laws. Yep, that's it. The whole model was basically lifted straight from the incredible success of physics. The idea was that a real, mature science is one that uncovers these universal, exceptionless laws of nature that govern everything, everywhere, all the time.
But here's the thing. When you try to apply that standard to biology, you just hit a wall. Biology, for all of its amazing explanatory power, just doesn't seem to have those kinds of universal, unbreakable laws. So, does that mean it just fails the test?
To really get this, we've got to be super clear on what a law of nature is supposed to be. It's not just a pattern that we see. A true law has to apply everywhere in space and time. On Earth, on some distant exoplanet, a billion years ago, a billion years from now. But here's the real kicker. It has to express necessity. It's not just describing how things happen to be, it's describing how they absolutely must be. There's no other option.
Okay, so let's put that super strict definition to the test. Take something as fundamental as Mendel's first law, right? A cornerstone of genetics. But is it a universal law? Nope. It's a product of the very specific way meiosis evolved right here on our planet. Life on another world could have a completely different system for passing on traits. Or how about Kleiber's law, which connects an animal's size to its metabolism? Well, it turns out that law is based on a model that assumes things are perfectly efficient, something evolution, with its messy, good enough solutions, never promises. These aren't universal necessities. They're more like historical accidents.
So wait, if they aren't universal laws, are they just random accidents? Flukes? Patterns that just so happen to be true for now? That doesn't feel right either, does it? It turns out the real problem here is thinking we only have two options. It's either an ironclad law or a total accident. Biology operates in the huge, fascinating space in between. And that better way of thinking is this idea of resilience. Instead of an all-or-nothing law, think of resilience more like a dial. A pattern is resilient if it holds up across tons of different situations. And importantly, it probably would have held up even if things had turned out a little differently. Mendel's law is incredibly resilient for life on Earth, even if it wouldn't work on planet Zorg. It's a much more flexible and, honestly, a much more useful idea for biology.
And this is the absolute key. Biology isn't just a failed attempt to be like physics. Over the years, it's developed its own incredibly sophisticated and powerful toolkit of explanatory strategies. A toolkit that's perfectly designed for the messy, complex, and historical nature of life itself. So let's open up that toolkit. All right, the first major tool we're pulling out of the kit is the explanation of mechanisms. This is all about answering that one simple, crucial question. How does this thing actually work? Now, to get what mechanisms are, you first have to understand that there are basically two kinds of systems. On one side, you have organized systems like a car engine or a single cell. The specific arrangement of every little part is everything. You can't just swap a piston for a spark plug and expect the car to run. But on the other side, you have aggregative systems like a whole population of animals or a volume of gas. Here it's the overall statistical average that matters, not the specific identity or location of any one part. And that's exactly where mechanisms shine. A mechanism is the how it works explanation for those organized systems. It explains a super complex behavior, like, say, how a muscle contracts, by breaking it down, showing you the arrangement of all the parts, the proteins and the fibers, and exactly how their interactions create that final outcome. It's the nitty-gritty of how things fit together and work. Okay, that's great for things we can take apart. But what about those big, messy, aggregative systems, like an entire ecosystem? For those, biology pulls out another amazing tool: building models. Now, modeling isn't about making a perfect little copy of reality. Actually, it's pretty much the opposite, and this is the cool part. The strategy is to first pick your complex, real-world target. Then, you intentionally idealize it. You create a simplified, imaginary version that leaves out a ton of detail on purpose to focus on just a few key things.
Third, you use math or a computer to see what happens in this simple little made-up world. And finally, you take the lessons you learn from the model and relate them back to the messy reality you started with. So what you get from a model isn't some universal law, it's a conditional if-then statement. Take this classic hawk-dove example from evolutionary game theory. It says if you have a population with these specific costs and benefits for being aggressive versus passive, then you can expect the population to settle into a stable mix of both. See? It doesn't say all populations everywhere will do this. It reveals the powerful logic of what happens under very specific pressures.
So let's put it all together. When we stop trying to judge biology using the ruler of physics, this much richer, more interesting picture comes into focus. A picture of a science with its very own powerful and totally sophisticated toolkit. And this right here is the big takeaway. Biology isn't a lesser science or a failed version of physics. It's a different kind of science. It doesn't need universal laws because for the stuff it studies, it has something way more appropriate. This amazing, diverse toolkit that's perfect for identifying resilient patterns, for analyzing intricate mechanisms, and for building insightful models of complex systems. You know, in the end, the true power of any science isn't really about its ability to find universal laws. It's about its ability to match its methods to the unique complexity of the thing it's studying. And biology, with all its messy, tangled, beautiful history, has done exactly that. Which leaves us with one final, kind of mind-bending thought to chew on. If different sciences, like physics and biology, use such fundamentally different toolkits to explain the world, can we really say there's just one single scientific method that covers them all? Something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me.